Okay, so my name's Scott Badeau. I'm the creator and host of the Mere Mortals Mountain Biking Podcast. And I've got a really special treat today. We've got somebody who's an absolute expert in both cycling, physical therapy, bike fitting, lots of different things. So Jessie, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Dr. Jessie Duppler. I'm the owner of Chain Reaction Physical Therapy here in Prescott, Arizona. I'm also a bike fitter. I was actually a bike fitter before I went to PT school. It's one of the things that got me into PT. So I work a lot with endurance athletes, so mountain bikers, road cyclists, and a lot of ultra runners too.
Excellent. So do you mind if we start with the bike fitting topic?
Sure, let's talk about it.
So I know when I first got into biking, mountain biking at least, the first bike I bought did not fit me whatsoever. It felt like it might have been what they had available rather than what was best for me.
Right.
And then the next bike I bought, which was actually when I moved to Prescott, just fit like a glove. So can you go over like some super basic ideas for somebody who's wanting to get into the sport and fit it to their body?
I do, yeah. And it is very specific for each person, but usually there's a couple different parameters we like to look at. So like the first one typically is knee angle at the bottom of the pedal stroke. So you want that to be somewhere around 145 to 155 degrees. So if you draw an angle from middle of your knee, bisect your thigh and your lower leg, that should be like 145, 155 degrees or so.
Okay.
From there, that's usually one that can get you actually pretty far as where you need to be. Because depending on, basically bike fitting is just a bunch of geometry, right? It's a bunch of triangles. So if you get your knee angle correct, a lot of times that can help see like where your knee is over your pedal and your reach, all those sorts of things. But the other big one to look at is reach, actually. So if we talk about what your reach should look like, we talk about, from your shoulder down your upper arm and down your trunk. That's a little bit different depending on mountain bikes versus road bikes. Road bikes, we have a little bit more typically, quote unquote arrow or stretched out fit. That's somewhere around 80 to 100 degrees or so. In the mountain bike, because we want to be a little bit more, cockpit's just a little bit shorter typically. It's a little bit closer to 80 degrees or so. Last thing typically that people look at, if you're just looking to do a kind of quick and dirty, is ankling. So how much toe down you have too. Because a lot of times people will have an okay knee angle, but they'll just be like pedaling with their toes the entire time. That should be somewhere around 10 to 20 degrees or so. More than that, typically you have to drop your saddle. Less than that, typically we're looking at moving saddle actually fore or aft usually will help with that. Okay. So those are a couple of quick parameters to look at. And then of course you can dive into a billion things if you want to get even more specific.
So how do you go about looking up those things when you're in the bike shop? Mm-hmm. Can you have like a friend hold the bike and kind of get a rough measurement?
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like, fit and sag or something for your mountain bike too, right? Like if you can, and if you are at a bike shop, they should at least put you on that and have you do that, be able to adjust at least saddle height, and fore aft for you too, if you're going to try something out. So, one of the best things you can do, is just sit on it. And then one way to think about it too, this is a little bit of this is a really old measure, but if you pedal and have your foot at the bottom of the pedal stroke, you should be able to straighten your knee and drop your heel, basically. So that's a real quick and dirty way to look at kind of if you're able to be within the parameters you want for like that frame size.
Okay. So let's assume I'm at a bike shop and I've kind of set that up. And then when I get at home, you mentioned fore and aft on the saddle. Can you explain sort of how that adjustment impacts our enjoyment of the bike and what does fore and aft mean for the AC?
Yeah, so fore and aft is basically moving the saddle forward or backwards. So one of the other things we look at is what's called knee over pedal spindle. So if you have your knee at 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock, depending on what size you're looking on the bike, you want your knee relatively right over your pedal spindle. So if, moving your saddle forwards and backwards is going to affect that measurement.
Okay.
So once you look at saddle height, looking at that fore aft and trying to find that spot where that knee is relatively over the pedal spindle, that kind of informs where that saddle should be. And again, between those two things, because everything really is just a triangle, that'll then change your knee angle too. So that's kind of the fun thing about bike fit is typically we change one thing, we look at what that variable did, then we change the next thing, we look at what that variable did. So everything is interconnected. So it's fun to see what you can do with one change and then see kind of where you have to go from there.
Okay, excellent. So in my process, I've sort of started with the seat, and then I've noticed that bikes are getting longer.
Yeah.
Any tips on like how to choose the right size for you based on that stretched out
Yeah.
length.
I know, long top tubes and just like raked out like crazy now.
Yeah.
So it is getting tougher and tougher for, especially, and I'll tell you this too. I'm built like a ferret, so I got a really long torso and short legs. It's easier to fit me on a bike than it is to fit people with longer legs. Yeah, my husband's like that too.
Yeah,
exactly. So, because that top tube length really does affect the entire geometry of the bike, right? So, a lot of times looking at a couple things, mountain bikes, especially, making sure that the stem isn't too long for the bike as well too.
Okay.
The longer the stem, obviously, will also increase the reach. And oftentimes, I think there's less like brand loyalty these days, but a lot of different brands kind of trend towards different things. So for a while there, Trek was having a really long top tube. So just looking for your brands that might fit your body the best too. Also looking at things like saddles and the positioning as far as even the length of the saddle, because that'll change how you sit and that can change your communication with the top tube as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've noticed certain friends will just buy the exact bike that their buddy liked, thinking that it will provide them the exact same experience, but we're all built differently, versus I've sort of narrowed in on a particular brand, just like you mentioned, and enjoyed staying with. At least I've gotten used to their geometry. So we've got the saddle height and that sort of thing, and the stem and the length of how far we're leaning forward. What else should somebody be looking at with the bike? Like, what about one of the challenges I've had is I'm kind of in between sizes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I see that problem too, because like I'm 5'5", so like I could fit on a small or a medium, but again, with this long torso, I usually end up trending towards a medium. But one of the other things you want to look at is stack height. So especially when we're talking to people that have neck pain too. So, a lot of people think that, the lower the better, right? Like really slam that stem. But what that does is it results in a lot of neck pain, because you then have to extend your neck even more to look down the trail or look down the road. The other thing it does is it really decreases your hip angle as well. The more slammed down you are, the less room you have for the hip to actually rotate.
Yeah.
So a lot of times looking at where you are as far as how low you are, so your relative drop from your bars to your saddle too.
Yeah.
And, there's no parameter for that so much because everyone's so different. But again, if you look back at that shoulder angle we talked about, that will get changed depending on your drop as well. So finding something that allows you to look up and be able to hold that position without feeling like your neck is really tired, your shoulders are coming up towards your ears, that's a really important part to make sure that you can look at that. So a lot of times too, that's a good one to look at the bike shop too, because sometimes if they've already cut that steer tube, you're kind of out of luck as far as how far up you can bring those bars too.
Yeah.
So making sure that it feels comfortable for you and not feeling like there's a ton of stress on the upper body or the neck's important as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So these are all things that I went through a couple of years ago when I did get the exact same bike, but the exact same model was quite a bit different.
Yeah.
And so just for those of you who aren't aware, if you go to a shop and the fork is already connected to the frame and they're going to cut that top steer tube of that fork off at a certain level, versus you may want to raise the handlebar up and have a longer steer tube. So I had the lucky possibility of being able to get that uncut.
Oh, good.
And sizing it to my own preferences. But I have noticed certain bike shops, you might think, oh, I'll just get a cross-country bike because I don't need to huck off cliffs and that sort of thing.
Right.
Like the shop may have cut that height of the fork tube, which then lowers the height of the handlebars down, and now you're pretty much riding like a professional, a hairy, aggressive stance. What about handlebar sweep and sort of fixing the stack or the rise issue at the handlebars? Because for me, when I'm in between sizes, like the extra large frame brings the handlebars nice and tall, but they're so far away that it almost negates it. And so I actually downgraded to a large. I have the same bike as your husband, but I think, is he an XL or a large? I can't remember.
Depends on which bike you got. He's
really?
He's got an XL and then he's got a large.
Yeah.
He's a Rebel now, because same thing. He's kind of between as well.
Yeah. So I downgraded to a large to pull it closer, and then I just handled it with very high-rise handlebars.
Exactly.
And thank God for this. So can you talk through some of that stuff that you go through with your clients?
Yes, you're totally right in that if you're limited by that steer tube, you're a little bit limited to then, depending upon the sweep back and the stem rise as well. Because that's what you can do, right? You can get a stem that's a little bit higher. The problem with mountain bikes is they only make their stems so short, and a lot of times you can't necessarily get a very short stem with a very high rise either. So you're right. Then you end up depending on sweep and just rise of the actual bars themselves. That's usually what we end up doing. You know, we end up putting something that's maybe a 20 millimeter rise or something with a high, more of a sweep than like the typical 8 degrees or so, so that people can be a little bit closer. So, and typically, you know, and everyone's different, right? But a lot of times that actually does make people feel not only better just because they're not really reaching, but they also feel like they've got a little more control too. So that can oftentimes make people feel a little bit better on the bike too.
Okay, awesome. So those are great tips on maybe going shopping for a bike. Let's say somebody already has a bike.
Yeah.
And they weren't as lucky as me. It didn't fit them like a glove. My first bike I bought here. What do you go through with your clients to sort of make recommendations on what they should do to your bike? Because they obviously have a certain set of equipment already, and this equipment's fairly expensive to purchase. But I think when I've chatted with you in the past, like you can pretty much tell, right, based on those angle measurements, what you would recommend them to go
Totally. Yep. And so, and a lot of times too, if we can make tweaks, we can make tweaks with, you know, again, with what we're doing with the saddle, or change out even the saddle, change out bars, change out bar positioning and brake positioning. I do actually have a partnership with Soul Ride down here too. So they gave me a little thing that gets 10% off parts for people. So typically what I'll do is I have a little like prescription pad thing, and I'll write down if I need to get new parts for people. I'll write it down, and then Zach over there can order it and give people at least a little bit of discount. Because you're right, you know that, you know, cycling is it's not a cheap sport. And so, man, all the components just keep getting more and more expensive for sure. So I try to make what they have work as best as possible. But then I always say, hey, listen, like if you want this, you know, my professional recommendation is if you want this to fit as best as possible, here are the things I see. Here's what we can't do with your bike. And here's what we need to change. So here's the stem that would be helpful. Here are the bars that would be helpful. Whatever else it might be if we need to change anything. And then usually I send them over to Soul Ride, and they set them up pretty good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if you're in Arizona, I highly recommend Jessie for bike fitting. But if you're not, one of the things I've sort of realized is to work with somebody like you that has a partnership with a bike shop, because not everybody will understand the exact type of equipment they need, and having you write it down exactly what the shop should get for them. Yeah. Because it can be pretty daunting looking through handlebars and seeing, at least in my experience, you might get a high-rise bar, but then the back sweep and the way that you have the bar tilted on the bike, you know, it kind of goes back to the geometry class that we may or may not have paid attention to in high school.
Exactly.
You can actually negate all of those things just by turning it the wrong way.
Totally.
Sort of
yeah, it's really nice to have. And so when I was a bike for the past, I worked at a bike shop. So, you know, we had everything there. We could just, you know, pull whatever off the wall and change it there. But since I don't keep inventory here, obviously, it's nice to know that those guys down there, and when I give them the stuff, they also know like how to change it out for these people too. They know what's going on. So it's not just kind of like, here's your information, do with it what you want, you know? So having that ability to make sure people after they leave here have the right info to, you know, take the steps to actually execute is, I think, important. So
excellent. So a couple things that I find different amongst riders that might change their preferred fit is their riding style, as well as how flexible they are, or for me, it's lack thereof.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the differences in the rider versus what you might recommend they look at or fit their bike to?
Yeah, so same thing if we look at some of those parameters we talked about before, especially if I look at ankling. So the ankle angle when people are pedaling, that can give me a lot of good information on like what their hamstrings and their calf are doing. So a lot of times when people have, you know, quote unquote tight hamstrings or tight calves, what you'll see is they'll point their toe down more so that they can take some pressure off of that system and that change. So looking at how they're moving, also looking at, you know, how they hang out on the bars, right? So part of it, and what I always tell people is, especially if people are having pain on the bike, typically it's two things. Typically it's how you generate force on the bike, and then it's how the bike is actually supporting you while you generate that force. So the nice thing about having both a bike fitting experience and then being a PT is I can't just look at your bike without looking at your body. So typically we'll end up doing some sort of, typically people end up getting some sort of exercise prescription from me because I can't help myself, but to address whatever might be happening with that mobility, because again, we can fit the bike to your body, but if we can also give your body a couple tips on how to move a little bit better, kind of more's the better too. And that's part of the reason too, when we talk about bike fits, is it's not only is everyone different, but people are different throughout phases of their lives too, right? So especially like my high-end athletes, when it's base miles versus race season, their fit might change. As we get older, our fit definitely changes. So
I'm not the only one.
yeah, no. I will tell you, man, I used to be, one of those racers that would slam or stem, and now I'm like, what was I thinking? So, my back hurts. So, things have gotten up higher and higher as I get older and older. But so I think just looking at how people pedal on the bike gives me a lot of information what's going on off the bike. So especially if they're like hanging off their bars too and have all their pressure on their bars, sure, it might be that their reach needs work, but it also might be that their abs actually can't hold them up very well. Or it might be that their shoulder muscles don't know how to support their neck, and so everyone's just kind of hanging out together. So looking at how they communicate with the bike gives me a lot of information on what their body might be doing or not doing that might be contributing to why they don't feel that great on the bike.
Okay. And you offer virtual bike fitting?
I do, yeah. So same thing. So I have people take a bunch of videos and send them to me, and then I get to review them. I look them over. I send back Loom videos with commentary on them, and drawing all my circles and my angles for everyone so they can see exactly what I'm talking about. And then recommendations for all the stuff that they should change. So, change saddle, bring saddle 2 millimeters forward, bring it 1 millimeter down, whatever it might be. So, and then because, it is humans are humans, what I have them do is I have them make the changes and then give them a 2-week period to try it out. And if they have any feedback, let me know, hey, this still felt a little funny. And so we can still kind of back and forth and make sure it's tuned into exactly what they need to do, even if they're not here in the clinic with me.
And how long do you recommend that they ride on a particular change before making a revised opinion on that change?
I say 3 or 4 rides. Give it a little bit of time to see how that feels for you, because your body's going to be like, well, what the heck did you just do? So I'll give it a couple of rides before you commit to one way or the other.
Okay.
Again, there is that paradigm for like the pro racers that, the more aero, the better. But the problem is you can be as aero as you want, but if you can't breathe through your rib cage because you're too crunched, then it doesn't really matter. You can have the most aero car in the world, but if you have no gas in it, then you're gonna have a hard time getting very fast. So it's always a give and take between, what a rider wants, obviously, and what's best for them, what supports their bike and their body, and how we can get the most performance out of them, or if it's just pain free or endurance or whatever their goals are in the end.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, my bike setup, as an example, I've got a race cross-country bike with a high stack on the steer tube and riser bars. It looks like I took the front of a downhill bike and put it on a race bike. And then even my Ripley is unusual. Like, I think if I remember right, your husband has a fairly short stem on it. I just don't like that. And so I have a long stem on a trail bike, and these are the things that work for me. And I notice friends or the students I coach or whatever, just sort of looking around and thinking like, well, if I got a short stem like Billy, then I would be fast like Billy. And typically what I find is Billy is fast because he's A, having fun, and B, has a setup that works best for him.
Exactly.
That may not work for the rest of us.
You got it. Yeah. So it comes down a lot too. And I always tell people too, right? Like when you're in pain, you're not going to perform your best anyway. So, and everyone has a personal preference. Like Jeff, my husband, has a really short stem too, because he comes from a moto background. And so they always had a really short, turns out they have really short stems as well too, or short reaches on moto bikes. And so that's what he's comfortable with. Cause same thing. And especially I came from a road background too. So I'm all about being like really stretched out. I used to have like a 90 mil stem on one of my first mountain bikes. So, it's just, it's personal preference. And how you fit on a bike is going to be different than how the next person fits on the bike. And, you might even be the same height as someone and you may fit completely differently on a bike too, given how proportions are so different for bodies too.
And do you look at suspension at all with bike fits?
I look at, how when they're on the bike, again, like sag and what that looks like. I don't make suggestions for suspension, mostly because that's riding style specific too for people. And so, that's kind of, doesn't affect the bike fit as much as a lot of the other parameters. So I obviously look at what it looks like when they load the bike, but as far as, unless it's like something crazy, I'm like, you're not using any of your suspension then. But typically I look at what they like to ride and then we fit around that.
Okay. I've actually got an episode scheduled with one of the major suspension manufacturers I'm quite excited about, because going back to my journey, I went from like a 2018 kind of shorter reach bike that fit me really good, but it also had, I guess you'd say, lower end components, but they're also simpler. And then I got this new bike. It was stretched out. It had the Fox micro adjust on the suspension with the compression and the rebound and all that stuff. And I just kind of set it up as suggested. And it honestly just didn't work well for me.
Right.
And it probably was in conjunction with some fit issues. But I do a couple clicks quicker on the rebound to keep me in that upright position on most rides. And then I can always, dial it down if I need it. But that's one thing that I've kind of been paying a little bit of attention to and recommended to a few folks. It seemed to have helped me at least.
For sure. Yeah. I don't think I've ever, I'll set it to the factory settings, what they recommend. And then I don't think I've ever actually liked whatever the recommendation is for my weight. So I think I think it's always just really personal preference. So, so that's why I like to, when I fit people, to have them have a bike that they have ridden. If it's a new bike, then we'll set it up and we'll just kind of look, I'll have them ride outside and be like, hey, how does that feel? So we have that general idea and we're not just going off factory settings, but at least have something that they like so we can make sure that they feel comfortable on the trail with how their bike's responding to stuff.
Yeah, excellent. So you mentioned as part of the bike fitting process, you almost always, if I remember correct, send your client home with some body exercises to do. Can you talk through that a little bit more?
Yeah. So again, like I said, a lot of times with bike fits, a lot of people are coming to me for bike fits because they have some sort of pain point. Most people aren't like, I feel great on my bike. Can I get a bike fit? So, and again, typically it is the two things, right? It's never just one thing. It's how the bike fits you and then how you're generating force on the bike. So, and those two things communicate together and work together. So a lot of times we'll see something like, say, like I mentioned, if someone has tight hamstrings or whatever it might be. The question that always goes through my mind is, okay, but why are they tight in the first place? A lot of times it can be because, the glutes are also working too hard, or maybe the quads are taking over, or whatever it might be. And so if we can give you something to also make you a little more efficient on the bike while we make a bike fit that can support you, again, usually it ends up being, more power, better performance, feeling better on the bike too. Because I can give you all the tools for the bike to feel good, but we might as well make your bike or your body also feel good at the same time. And that's part actually why I went from bike fitting to PT, because I was fitting people on bikes and I was saying, but his hips moving a little funny, or this is kind of looking a little funny on when they walk. And so PT had already been on my list of possible things, but looking at that, I was like, oh, well, if I help people move their body better and then I help them move, with their bike, that seems like a pretty good combo. So awesome. That was part of what kind of fed me into PT.
Okay. And what about beyond the strength exercises? I remember back in PE class, right, always doing the stretching, but me and my adult friends aren't as good about that. But talk to me about how important that is. And do you stretch before the ride or after the ride, or what's the best?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'll tell you, as far as stretching is concerned for me, I could kind of take it or leave it. The reason being, again, the question we always ask in PT is why. So something doesn't just get tight for no reason. So what I tell people is tightness is a symptom, not a cause. So something is tight because something else isn't working appropriately. So a lot of times, and I'll see this in the clinical a lot, people come and be like, I feel tight in X, Y, and Z. And as we work on changing their movement patterns, they are like, I don't feel like I need to stretch anymore. I don't feel tight all the time anymore. So because again, we've unloaded some systems that are working too hard and reloaded appropriately the other systems. So honestly, stretching for me, I'm like, if you like it, go for it, do it. Whatever feels tight, go ahead and stretch it. Before, after, doesn't make a huge difference. But really, we want to ask why something might be tight, especially something's chronically tight all the time. If you always feel like you have to stretch your hamstrings and it's never really changing, then we know there's another layer that we have to look at. So more often than not, I should say, I don't care when you stretch. More often than not, afterwards is a little bit better way to kind of ease tension after a bike ride. But honestly, again, my recommendations are let's figure out why you're tight. So yeah.
That's really interesting. I've kind of observed that in my own life. All of a sudden something will flare up and I'll think it's because I'm not stretching. Mm-hmm. But as you were saying that, I was kind of rewinding the gears in my brain and remembering that it was probably because something else was going on causing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you come see me for PT, you'll probably get some stretches and you'll get some foam roll work, but it's all in a effort to open up a window to then teach the body how to move better. Okay. So a great example of that is a lot of times, or not a lot, sometimes, In progressions, I'll have my cyclists foam rolling their quads because we all know we love to use our quads. And in the beginning, it's pretty terrible. It doesn't feel very good for people. And then after a week or two, they're like, I don't really feel as many tight spots at all. Like, it doesn't feel like it's doing that much. It's like, great. I don't want it to be doing that much because now your quads aren't working so hard. So a lot of times we'll use it as a tool in the short term, and it'll be in what I tell people it's their toolbox. You know, you can use it if something does flare up. But overall, we want to make sure we're not becoming dependent upon just stretching or just mobility to get the job done to feel good.
Okay. This is flashing me back to, I moved here from a ski town and I took this season-long lesson, and the lady was talking about some of these similar techniques, and that if you're feeling really bad after a day on the ski hill, you're probably not doing it right. And so she taught us how to distribute sort of that load over a greater portion of our body versus, I don't know for any other skier, but my friends just taught me, for example, in powder to lean back.
Okay.
And it's a little more complicated than that. But yet after 10 years of living in a ski town, I still was relying mostly on that technique versus once I learned how to do that distribution, now I can just pick up and go skiing for a week with no prep and be in no pain.
Nice.
And that's when I'm trying to get better out of my bike using the principles that you went over, because it's definitely gotten better, but I still have sort of those examples you mentioned where something's screaming at me.
Yeah. It's usually, our body usually tries to tell us when something's going on. Sometimes we listen, sometimes we don't, and that's okay. Sometimes we get away with it too. So
yeah. So I know you've mentioned a few of the different symptoms like neck pain, lower back pain, that sort of thing. You also have a lot of resources on your website for free, right? Can you go over kind of what the typical symptom is caused by, and then maybe highlight some resources that people could look into to kind of get them excited about maybe coming to a physical therapist to do this?
Yeah, you know, it's tough to get excited about PT, which I totally get. But so a couple different things. Like, I have a blog that I write a lot about bike fit stuff for.
What's the website?
Chainreactionpt.com. So, and I also have actually on there, I have a free bike fit guide that you can download too that talks about some of the stuff that we talked about today with some of those angles and road bike versus mountain bike. So people have some ideas on how to kind of start with their bike fits too. So, some of the blogs I have, like, I know I'd have one about knee pain. You know, the pain on the knee, where it is, can tell us kind of what you need to do for your bike. So typically, say if you have pain on the inside of your knee, typically that has to do, and again, this is where it comes down to, it has to do with two things. Typically it has to do with what your hip is doing. So a lot of times if we lack hip stability, we'll see it in pain on the inside of the knee. Okay. And then also times if we have adductors, so the muscles on the inside of the knee, if they're not working as appropriately as we need them to, a lot of times that'll cause pain on the inside of the knee. Pain on the bottom of the knee, so like below your kneecap, a lot of times that'll come from a saddle that's a little too low. Pain on top of the knee or above the kneecap, sometimes that's from a saddle that's too high. So, and again, these are parameters, everybody's different, but a lot of times that's what I see kind of over and over again. So at least if you're having some of that pain, you can kind of spot check it and be like, oh, maybe my saddle is too low. Let me move it up a little bit and see how that feels.
What about as we get older? I've been suggested a lot of stuff on social media from the algorithm, so it clearly knows my age. And one of the things is always about aging cyclists. So can you talk through about how the sort of day-to-day taking care of our body might change as we start to get a little bit older?
Yeah, and I'll tell you honestly, a lot of the recommendations I have for my aging cyclists is the same thing I have for my younger cyclists too. And the bad news there is it really comes down to strength training a lot of the times. So as we get older, so after 30 years old, we can lose up to 10% of our muscle mass every year. With a cyclist, cycling is technically a non-weight bearing sport too. So we don't have the same load into our bones that, say, runners do. So when we start to get older, we start to even get concerned about things like bone density as well. So strength training becomes a really important way, because strength training actually helps increase bone density too. So strength training for both bone density, for muscles, as well as getting us out of postures that we're in when we're biking, right? So again, running is something we've been doing for millennia. Biking is not. So it's a position that our body is not necessarily supposed to be in for long periods of time. And so, and I always tell people, no posture is a bad posture unless you can't get out of it. And so making sure that you're doing exercise in the gym too that do require extension and rotation and things that our spine just usually doesn't do. So as we get older, strength training and just muscle mass in general starts to become really, really important for us. It's also important because it really just helps us maintain things like VO2 and cardio ability. because it feeds into that too. People think, strength training and aerobic capacity are two different things, and they're not. So the stronger your muscles are, the better and more efficient they can be. So especially like me personally, running my own clinic, I don't ride as much as I used to. I don't really have as much time. But what I've found is I do have 40 minutes to spend in the gym. And the time I've spent in the gym has really helped me maintain my fitness on the bike for when I can go ride. So it's really helpful to also help us. Because, as we get older too, I was like, I'm just slower now. And so the more conditioned we can be in general, the better we are both on and off the bike. And the better it is for injury prevention too. Because as we get older too, we're a little more prone to injury. So the stronger and more robust and resilient we are, the less likely we are to get hurt and then be off the bike for even longer.
It's really interesting because I love this podcast project because I'm learning so much.
Yeah.
Even though I thought I knew a fair amount, I'd never thought about the difference between an activity like running, having that weight on my body versus biking, the weight is on my saddle.
You got
That's
it.
really interesting.
Yeah. And so we see one of my good friends, he says, we always have to be careful because we don't want our bird bones to break when we grab. Because, it's always, it's not if, it's when, unfortunately, for most of us to hit the ground at some point. And so that's also why upper body stuff becomes important for cyclists too. They think, I'll just work on my lower body. But again, the more muscle mass we have in our upper body, the quite little more cushion we have and the more resilience we have in our bones for when we do go down. Because, we always see a lot of collarbone fractures, a lot of shoulder injuries, a lot of outstretched hands. So the stronger that stuff can be too, also the better off you are when you do and inevitably, unfortunately, hit the ground.
Oh, excellent. So you brought up injury. Obviously, in a serious situation, somebody should consult medical advice, but let's just say somebody's kind of, spraying something or anything like that. What's your general advice in those situations?
So again, it depends a little bit to the degree of it, but and also to how things feel. So the other nice thing about cycling being non-weight bearing is a lot of times if we do have like a lower body strain or sprain, cycling typically can still feel pretty good for us for the most part. So even like a meniscus tear, sometimes cycling can still be helpful for that, especially if weight bearing doesn't feel very good. So ligaments take somewhere around 6 to 10 weeks to heal. So we always have to be, I tell people we're always at the mercy of physiology. So we do have to be cognizant of how the body heals when we are thinking about, can I get back on the bike or can I start training with a little bit more heavier load? A lot of times in that instance, pain kind of has to be our dictator, as well as, if you get off the bike and you see more swelling or there's more redness in the area or anything like that, anything that increases symptoms afterwards tells us, okay, we need to dial that back a little bit.
Okay.
There's been more and more research coming out about, the whole like rest, elevate, ice, all that stuff, not actually as good as we thought it was. So one of the best things we can typically do for injury is if we can do or introduce some sort of gentle movement into whatever joint might be hurt. So again, if that is, say, you sprain something in your ankle or your hip or whatever, if you can get on the bike and do some gentle riding, typically that can actually be very helpful to just jumpstart some of that healing process. So, but again, it's a little bit situation dependent upon degree of the strain or sprain and this location and that sort of stuff.
Okay, excellent. This is one area where I definitely stumbled upon that benefit because skiing was very difficult to get out there after an injury, but biking, I would just go into a couple easier gears, do a little bit flatter ride and it felt pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's good to know why.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great rehab tool too, turns out. So
excellent. Okay, so you've given a ton of resources on how to fit your bike, how to make your body prepared, that sort of thing. But one thing I personally struggle with is about 30 minutes into the ride, if you took a photo of me, you probably wouldn't be impressed with my posture. I get lazy, I get tired. So any tips on how to remind ourselves how to stay in the proper riding position?
Yeah. And I will say, a lot of us obviously, right, we all like to do a lot of thoracic flexions. We like to round forward a lot. Some of the best things we can do is look at what's happening below the thoracic spine. So what's happening at your hips? A lot of times simply just tucking your hips underneath you will help take some stress off of the low back and allow you to lengthen low back a little bit. So kind of working from bottom up can be helpful and then actually working from top down. So, a lot of times we'll round forward on the bike and we'll start to just push or let our chest just kind of drape between our shoulders. If you can think about pushing your chest back or pushing your arms forward, that actually activates a muscle called our serratus anterior. It's the muscle that when you see a boxer punch, that feathery muscle, it's actually a really important muscle because it controls our shoulder and it controls our rib cage. So using that muscle to help support us can put us in a lot better supported position in the rib cage so that we don't feel like we're A, just like holding on to the bars for dear life, or B, asking our low back to just try and hold us up as well.
Okay. What about, am I doing this right or wrong? I'll try to just pause and do shoulder rolls, that sort of thing. Is that?
Totally fine. Yeah. Especially too, like I said, no posture's bad unless we can't get out of it. And so that like when we are in that hunched over position, typically we start to get fatigued at some point. So if you can pause, get yourself out of it, do some movement,
Okay.
I think that's a really helpful one for people to do. Just whatever feels good, honestly. If you can pause and do it, go for it.
Okay, excellent. Because one of the episodes, or I guess several of the episodes I'm doing, are about racing, and that can be a very intimidating idea. And for me, the different lengths of the race really changes my enjoyment or lack thereof. And so I'm okay for about 90 minutes, and then my body starts screaming at me. But one of the things that I completely and accidentally stumbled upon was I love these 24-hour races because I can do about 45 to 90 minutes on a lap. I can take as much time as I need to kind of get my posture back, do some stretching because, my body isn't in an ideal situation. And then I can go out and do another lap versus I could not do like a 4 or 5 hour straight through bike ride unless they gave me a couple minutes, penalty time because I pulled over. And
Fair enough. Yeah.
so it's really interesting for me, and hopefully other people can, discover this, is that there's different types of biking and racing and this sort of thing. We just have to do what works well for our body.
Totally.
And I have certain friends that just like to go out and rip for 2 hours, and the only stopping is when we put the bike in the rack at the end.
Yeah.
And then other friends that, like to pause frequently, and depending on how I'm feeling, I sometimes really enjoy those pauses.
For sure. Yeah. That's what I really learned too. We talk about racing and like being now an ex-racer, like turns out you can just like go ride for fun. And you can do whatever you want. You can stop and pause. You can hammer if you want, but it's really nice to be able to be like, I think I'm just going to take a break right now. So.
Yeah. And here's a tip that I picked up from a skier friend of mine. He always said, hey, let's pull over and take a photo. We don't have enough photos of us all together. And finally asked him, I'm like, how many photos do you need of us? He's like, this is my secret when I need a break. So I pulled that out of the pizza.
That is perfect. That's such a good hot tip.
Especially with the kids, when my kids were young enough to not know my trick.
Yeah.
As dad was getting exhausted, I'd be like, hey, we need to take a family photo.
Yeah. I love that.
And they're like, why is dad doing his shoulder rolls?
Yeah.
And
That's pretty sneaky. I like that one.
yeah. So lots of great resources on your website. I think you also have a newsletter that we can sign up for as well.
I do. Yep. I have a twice a month newsletter. It talks about bike fits, PT, movement. Got workouts in there for people to do. So, because again, one of my big things is and I'll be honest with you, I hate strength training. I do not like being in the gym, but I'm not one of those people that's like, yeah, let's go lift some weights. But I do it because I know the benefit, and I know the benefit down the road too. So I've created a lot of 20-minute strength programs for people to do, because a lot of times people, same thing, they're intimidated. They don't really know what to do. They don't know what to do in the gym. They're like, I got 20 minutes. Now I got to spend 10 trying to figure out what the heck I'm going to do. So I put out a lot of like bite-sized information so people have stuff to do.
Oh, awesome.
And that way they have a way to get themselves in the gym just for something too. I also have a entire 12-week self-guided strength program for cyclists too. So it's called the Strength Revolution. That's also on my website, chainreactionpt.com/strength. And it takes people through an entire 12 weeks. So 3 workouts a week, what to do, how to do it, why you're doing it, why these exercises are good for cyclists. Because again, same thing. Since I don't like to ride or lift, I know a lot of other people don't either. We'd all rather just be on our bikes. So I've been trying to give information to people that's really succinct, really helpful, efficient, gets you in the gym, gets you out of the gym, gets you back on the bike. So, because again, I just know the importance of strength training, both in my own life, in my patients' lives, physiologically speaking, and especially when it comes to both longevity, quality of life, and quality on the ride too. So I try to put a lot of free information out there too. I've got a YouTube as well with lots of exercises, both PT and strength related as well. So my fifth just Chain Reaction PT. And then, I'm really active on Instagram too, which is also Chain Reaction PT. You'll see all my 20-minute workouts there, a lot of information about all sorts of stuff. So, those are, I think, always places for me to just give a lot of information out.
Well, you have motivated me to do strength training more seriously, because my definition of it thus far has been, well, just ride in a little bit harder gear and that's going to build strength, right? Or, I've signed up for Fitbod and I do it for a little bit, but I love that perspective you gave about the importance of doing it with it not really being as much of a load-bearing sport. So I've got kind of a lightning round of questions for you.
Heck yeah.
So what's the first mountain bike you ever owned?
first mountain bike I ever owned. It was actually a Trek Top Fuel, actually. Nope, I lied. That was the first good mountain bike I owned. This wasn't a bad mountain bike. I got an old Trek X-Cal, actually. I used to live in Wisconsin, and so I knew a lot of people that worked for Trek, and so they had some like frame that was like unpainted or whatever. So actually, they powder coated it like lime green, which was super cool. And so that was my first mountain bike. And then first mountain bike when I moved out here and actually really started mountain biking was Top Fuel. So
awesome. Yeah. Flats or clipless pedals?
Clipless.
And why?
I think because again, I came from a road and cyclocross background, so I was always clipped in then. So I don't know how I'd pull up if I didn't have clipless now. So
I am curious to get your perspective on this. I switched to clipless about a year or so ago for the sole purpose or the main purpose of making sure that my posture is ideal on the bike, because, with flats, I always felt like I was kind of slipping around. Do you think there's anything to that, or am I overanalyzing?
No, I think if it helps, go for it. I've had people do the opposite too, because they feel like their foot's too constrained and cause like hip and knee problems too. So honestly, whatever fits better for you, go nuts.
What's the best piece of biking advice you've ever received?
Look further ahead.
Awesome.
Because, we're always too busy looking, where you look's where you're going to go. If you're looking right down, then you're going to hit the ground. So honestly, it's when I first started riding, someone told me that, and it's still really helpful to this day.
Guess where I was looking when I went down and hit my car?
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of describe your riding style, but in just one word.
Can I swear on this podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay. My husband, and this is an acronym, but my husband and I have a riding style called TDA. It's Team Dickin' Around. So.
I love it.
So we go and we ride for fun.
Having ridden with him on a couple group rides, he's definitely doing that even when you're not there. Yeah. That's why I really liked riding with him. Yeah. If your bike could talk, what would it say about you?
I'm dirty. Could you please ride? Or can you please clean me?
My bike is the exact same. And last one, what's the strangest place you've ever ridden your bike?
Ooh, let's see. Probably, I don't know if this is really strange, but it's far away. Wollongong, Australia. So, I was lucky enough to study abroad in college, and I brought my bike. So,
awesome.
I rode around there a lot. I actually had an internship up in Sydney, at like a nonprofit for bikes. And then, it's hard because they ride on the other side of the road there. So you have to like train your brain to look the other way at roundabouts. But, saw some really cool stuff, that way actually. And even did like I volunteered at a bike packing fundraiser that went like all the way across Queensland. So got to do some really cool stuff by bike.
Excellent.
Actually. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. I learned a ton, even though I feel like I had already learned a ton in the previous couple of years before we spoke. So I greatly appreciate it. And tons of resources at chainreactionpt.com.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. This is great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.